Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unsaid Hours. I know many of you listen to these stories to relax and slowly fall asleep. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin. I'm a 25-year-old woman, and the first time I ever encountered something truly unexplainable, I was 8 years old. That was the year my family moved to Bismarck, North Dakota. There were 7 of us, 5 kids, 2 parents, and the duplex we moved into was old in a way that didn't feel charming. It was cramped, uneven, and laid out like it had been altered too many times by people who never stayed long. My brother had his own room. My parents had theirs. My 3 sisters shared a room down the hall, and I slept in the storage room. It was at the very back of the house, partially underground, doubling as the laundry room. My bed was shoved beneath the staircase, boxed in by concrete walls and humming appliances. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a forgotten space the house didn't quite know what to do with. At night, when everyone else was asleep, I used to sneak out to the living room to watch South Park. I wasn't allowed to watch it. My brother had shown it to me once, and that was all it took. The volume stayed low. I memorized which floorboards creaked. I treated the house like it might wake up if I moved wrong. The walk from my room to the living room was long and dark. I'd slip out from under the stairs, pass through the kitchen, and enter the hallway, the worst part of the house. It stretched straight ahead, narrow and dim, with every important door branching off it. My parents' room, my sister's room, the bathroom, the front door, and a massive coat closet that always felt too deep. At the end of the hallway was the staircase leading up, and the boarded-up door at the top of it. No one ever explained why it was boarded shut. One night, halfway down the hallway, something changed. The air didn't just feel cold, it felt aware, heavy, like the moment before someone speaks your name. I stopped walking. Before I even turned my head, I knew I wasn't alone. The feeling crawled over my skin, raising every hair on my arms, settling in my chest like a held breath. Slowly, against every instinct screaming not to, I turned toward my sister's bedroom. She was standing there, a woman with bright red hair and a long white nightgown. She wasn't solid, not fully. Her body glowed faintly, translucent, like moonlight passing through fog. She didn't sway, she didn't blink. She just stared directly at me, not angry, not sad, focused, as if she were trying to understand what I was. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move. My lungs forgot what they were for. The hallway felt endless, like I'd been pinned in place by her gaze. Seconds stretched into something unbearable. Then, without a sound, she looked away, turned, and walked straight into my sister's room. She didn't open the door. She passed through it. That was enough. I ran. I sprinted back to my little bed under the stairs, dove beneath the covers, and pressed my face into the mattress, certain that if I moved, if I breathed too loud, she would come back for me. I stayed there until the house filled with morning light and the normal sounds of a family waking up. When I finally came out, my mom was in the kitchen, rushing everyone to get ready for school. I pulled her aside and told her everything. I described the woman carefully, the red hair, the white gown, the way she glowed. As I spoke, my mom's face went pale. She didn't interrupt me, didn't question me, didn't tell me I'd had a nightmare. When I finished, she just stared at me like I'd said something she was afraid to hear. I asked her what was wrong. Her voice shook when she answered. "Your sister told me she saw the same woman last night," she said, "in her room." I felt my stomach drop. She said the woman was taped to the wall. That was the moment everything changed. My parents had always believed in the paranormal. They talked about footsteps, voices, the doorbell ringing when no one was there. I'd always rolled my eyes. Not anymore. Not after that night. Not after her. I didn't wake up to the sound of my alarm. That was already going off when I noticed the message. The phone was on my nightstand, face up, buzzing faintly against the wood like it was nervous. The alarm kept chirping its cheerful synthetic tune, completely unaware of the way my stomach had tightened the instant my eyes focused. Unknown number, stay inside. Do not look outside. 5 words. All caps. No emoji, no punctuation, no explanation. For a few seconds I just sat there, propped on one elbow, staring at the screen, while the early winter light seeped through the slats of my blinds. My room looked exactly the way it always did in the morning. Laundry half folded on the chair, textbooks stacked unevenly on the desk, my backpack slumped against the wall like it had given up overnight. Nothing was wrong. That was the problem. I checked the time. 6:14 a.m. I let out a short, humorless laugh and turned off the alarm. It had to be a prank. Spam. One of those automated scare texts that went around sometimes. My friends thought stuff like that was funny, especially before exams. Still, my thumb hovered over the screen longer than it should have. "Who is this?" I typed. The message sent immediately. Delivered. No response. I set the phone down and stood, stretching the stiffness out of my legs. I had school, a math test I hadn't studied enough for, a bus I couldn't miss. Whatever this was, it didn't get to derail my morning. In the bathroom, the mirror reflected a version of me that looked normal enough. Sleepy eyes, messy hair, toothpaste foam at the corner of my mouth. I brushed my teeth while scanning the room through the glass. I half expecting to see something behind me, a shape, a shadow, someone standing too close. There was nothing. By the time I finished getting dressed, the text had dulled into a low, unpleasant buzz at the back of my mind. I grabbed my phone again as I headed for the stairs. There was another message. "They know you saw the first one." My foot slipped on the top step. I caught myself on the railing, heart lurching as if I'd fallen much farther. The house was waking up around me. I could hear my mom in the kitchen humming under her breath, the soft clatter of a plate against the counter. The smell of toast drifted up the stairs, warm and familiar. My phone buzzed again. "You have 3 minutes." 3 minutes for what? I whispered. My hands were shaking now as I typed. "Who are they?" The reply came so fast it felt like it had been waiting. Not who, what. A cold line traced its way up my spine. I became painfully aware of how loud everything was. The refrigerator's low hum, the tick of the wall clock, my own breathing. I went into the kitchen, forcing my shoulders to relax, my face into something neutral. My mom glanced up from the counter and slid a plate of toast toward me. "You look pale," she said. "Did you sleep at all?" "Yeah," I lied, sitting down. My phone rested on the counter between us, screen down, like it might bite. It buzzed. 2 minutes. I swallowed hard. "Mom, did you get any weird messages this morning?" She frowned. "Like what?" "I don't know. Texts from someone you don't recognize." She shook her head and reached for her coffee. "No. Why?" Another vibration. "They're closer than you think." My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. "I think someone's messing with me," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. My mom sighed, already half distracted. "Sweetheart, if it's a prank, ignore it. Eat. You're going to miss your bus." The phone buzzed again. 1 minute. The lights flickered, just once, quick, like a blink. My mom looked up. Probably the storm last night. Power's been weird all week. 30 seconds. Closet, bathroom, anywhere without windows. Do not be seen. My heart slammed so hard, it hurt. The specificity of it sent a jolt of real fear through me. This wasn't vague. This wasn't a joke. I stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the tile. "Mom, we need to go somewhere else in the house." She stared at me now, confusion turning into concern. "What are you talking about?" The lights flickered again, longer this time. The refrigerator hummed. I then stuttered. My phone vibrated almost constantly now, messages stacking on top of each other. They're here, do not let them see you, they mimic hide now. A sound came from outside, not footsteps, not a knock, a slow, dragging scrape like something heavy being pulled across concrete. My mom turned toward the front door. Did someone... Don't open it, I said louder than I meant to. The word tore out of me, sharp and panicked. She froze. What? The scrape came again, closer now, and underneath it, something else. A faint clicking sound, uneven, like fingernails tapping against metal at the wrong rhythm. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the bright, friendly chime we'd had for years. It buzzed too long, distorted, like someone was leaning on it with their whole weight. "Mom," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "Ah, please." She took a step back from the door. The doorbell stopped. Silence flooded the house so completely it made my ears ring. Then a voice came from the other side of the door. "Hello?" It sounded exactly like my mom. Not close, not muffled, perfect. She gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. The phone buzzed once more. That is not her. The voice spoke again, warmer now, familiar. "It's me. I forgot my keys." My mom's knees buckled slightly. I grabbed her arm, grounding both of us. The doorknob turned. Slowly. I didn't think. I just moved. I pulled her away from the kitchen, down the hall, my socked feet sliding on the tile. We ran like we were kids again, fleeing some imaginary monster, except this one was real enough to speak. Behind us, the front door creaked open. Footsteps entered the house. They were careful, measured. Like whoever was walking wanted to learn the space. We slammed into the bathroom and locked the door just as something brushed against the hallway wall outside. I yanked my mom into the tub and dragged the shower curtain closed, then reached blindly for the light switch and turned it off. Darkness swallowed us. We huddled there, knees pressed together, barely breathing. I could feel my mom shaking, her hand crushing mine hard enough to hurt. The footsteps moved closer, stopped just outside the bathroom. The handle jiggled once. Then a voice, my voice, spoke softly through the door. "I know you're scared. It's okay. You can come out now." Something inside my chest went hollow. My mom bit down on her knuckles to keep from making a sound. Silence followed, thick, heavy, the kind that stretches until you start to doubt your own senses. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time didn't work right in that dark. My phone buzzed weakly in my hand, the screen dimmed to conserve battery. "Good, stay still. They lose interest if they can't confirm you." "What are they?" I typed, my fingers numb. The reply took longer this time. "We don't know. They appear, they copy, they replace. We only know how to survive them." Another message followed. "You weren't the first one we warned." A loud crash came from the living room, the unmistakable sound of something being knocked over. That dragging scrape followed again, retreating now, moving toward the back of the house. Then the back door opened. Closed. Silence returned, fragile and incomplete. We stayed hidden until the sky outside the bathroom window brightened, until the fear dulled into something heavy and exhausting. My phone battery dipped into the red. My mom's breathing finally evened out. Eventually sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors' voices carried through the walls. Someone shouted about a break-in. The police said there were no signs of forced entry. They said nothing was missing. They said maybe someone had walked into the wrong house by mistake. That night, after everything settled, after my mom fell asleep on the couch beside me, I plugged my phone in and scrolled back through the messages. The number was gone. Not deleted. Gone. No sender. No record. Like it had never existed. Except for one final message. Time-stamped hours later. "We'll text again if you survive tomorrow." I locked my phone and stared at the dark window across the room. Outside, on the sidewalk across the street, someone stood very still, watching the house, me smiling with my face. This document is not part of any official police report. It exists because too many small pieces refuse to disappear. What follows was assembled from archived files, dismissed testimonies, handwritten notes, and statements marked unreliable or emotionally compromised. None of it was ever meant to be placed together. The connections were not noticed at the time. They only become visible when viewed as a whole. The name Evelyn Frank appears again and again. Evelyn Frank was 22 years old when the incident occurred. She was born and raised in the city, the youngest of three, and lived with her parents until the winter she moved out. There is no record of a major argument, no police calls, no family estrangement. According to a neighbor who later spoke to investigators, Evelyn's departure did not feel dramatic. It felt tired, like someone quietly realizing they could not stay where they were any longer. She rented a small room near downtown, one window, shared bathroom, thin walls, close enough to walk home after work. Evelyn worked nights as a mime. This fact was often treated as a novelty in reports, mentioned with an air of disbelief or faint mockery, as if it were a costume rather than a job. In reality, it was how she paid rent. She performed in local bars that allowed her space near the door or at the end of the room. She did not interact with patrons unless they approached her first. She did not speak during performances. Outside of work, she spoke very little at all. Co-workers later described her as shy rather than strange. She was insecure about her voice. She had difficulty projecting. Under stress, she sometimes froze and could not get words out at all. This was not part of her act. It was simply how she was. She only wore makeup while working, white face, dark eyes, red mouth. When she finished a shift, she washed it off completely before leaving. Several bartenders independently confirmed this. One said she was almost unrecognizable without it. Evelyn did not drink much. She smoked occasionally. She left early when she could. It was at one of these bars that she met the musician. He played guitar, sometimes solo, sometimes sitting in with other performers. He was not particularly well known, but he was consistent. He showed up when he was scheduled. He did not cause trouble. His name appears in booking calendars and bar logs, but not in any official criminal record. Witnesses described him as talkative, friendly, a person who filled silence easily. Evelyn listened. They began sharing smoke breaks behind the buildings after closing time. He walked her home more than once. They talked about nothing important: music, work, weather, small things. No one ever reported seeing them argue. No one described their dynamic as volatile or intense. Eventually, they began meeting outside of work, always at the same place, the East Pier. The pier was not scenic. It was functional, poorly lit, rarely patrolled at night. During the day, fishermen used it. At night, it was mostly empty. The water below it was dark and slow-moving. The wooden planks were old and uneven, with gaps wide enough to see the black surface shifting underneath. They would sit near the edge, smoke, and watch the water. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. It became routine. Now, on the night of the incident, that routine was followed. The musician told Evelyn to meet him at the pier after work. He did not explain why. Evelyn did not ask. That was how things usually went between them. He suggested. She agreed. She arrived just before midnight. Most of the lights along the pier were off. From a distance, she saw movement near the edge. Several figures standing close together. At first, she assumed they were fishermen packing up late. She kept walking. As she got closer, she realized they were not fishermen. The musician was there. He was on his knees. His posture was wrong, too stiff. His movements unsteady, as if he were trying to balance on something that shifted beneath him. 3 men stood around him. They were not shouting. One spoke quietly. Another held his arm. The third stood closer to the edge of the pier, facing the water instead of him. Evelyn stopped walking. According to later reconstructions, one of the men struck the musician in the face. It was not theatrical, it was quick and direct. He fell sideways and tried to push himself back up, his hands sliding on the damp planks. The second man shoved him toward the edge. The third man stepped forward and finished it. The fall was not clean. The musician's body struck the wooden edge of the pier before hitting the water. Witnesses later described the sound as dull rather than loud. A short splash followed, no scream. He did not resurface. Evelyn stepped backward. That movement was enough. One of the men noticed her. They did not appear surprised. There was no panic, no sudden shouting. They exchanged a brief glance, a look that seemed to confirm something already understood. Then they moved. They grabbed Evelyn by the arms before she could turn fully away. She did not scream. Whether she could not or simply did not is unclear. They dragged her beneath the pier into the dense framework of beams and supports. From above, nothing could be seen. Below, the sound of the water masked everything. They shoved her against a metal beam. She fell awkwardly. When she tried to stand, she was struck again. There is no precise record of how long this lasted. Medical notes suggest it was not brief. At some point, one of the men asked her what she had seen. Evelyn tried to answer. The words did not come, not only because of fear. According to later interviews with family members, when Evelyn was overwhelmed, her speech often failed her entirely. Her mouth would move. Her throat would lock. Sound would not follow. This appeared to irritate them. The knife was produced afterward. It was not waved. It was not used to threaten. There is no indication that it was meant to frighten her into silence. It was used because a decision had been made. The cut was irregular. The medical report described severe blood loss, but no immediate fatal injury. She lost consciousness beneath the pier. The men left her there and fled. Several hours later, shortly before dawn, a dock worker found her alive. She was slumped against one of the beams, barely conscious. Her injuries were severe. She could not speak. She repeatedly pointed at the water, then at her mouth. Emergency services were called. The musician's body was never recovered. Without a body and without a verbal witness statement, the investigation faltered almost immediately. There were no suspects willing to be identified. The pier had no cameras at the time. After several months, the case was archived. Evelyn Frank survived. Her physical recovery was slow. Her speech did not return. Doctors initially believed the damage was psychological rather than neurological. Trauma-induced mutism, shock. They expected improvement. There was none. Evelyn never returned to the bars. She never performed again. She moved back in with her parents briefly, then disappeared from public life almost entirely. During the day, she was rarely seen. At night, she was reported. The first reports were dismissed. A fisherman claimed that a woman sat motionless on the East Pier for hours one night, her posture rigid, her face turned toward the water. The following morning, a man was found drowned nearby. A night guard reported seeing a mime beneath a streetlight several blocks from the harbor. The figure appeared to be reenacting the movements of someone struggling to breathe. When he approached to tell her to leave, the streetlight flickered. When it stabilized, she was gone. These statements were filed as unreliable. Then a prostitute working near the harbor gave a more detailed account. She said she noticed a woman standing beneath a lamppost without makeup, her clothes damp as if from mist or spray. The woman stared at the water and did not move. Assuming she was another worker waiting for a client, the prostitute approached and tried to speak to her. The woman raised her hand. 2 fingers pressed gently over her lips. Then she pointed toward the pier. The prostitute described a sudden pressure in her chest, as if her lungs had stopped responding. She became dizzy, disoriented. When she blinked, the woman was gone. That same week, a regular client from the area was found dead near the water. There were no signs of violence. The cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. The prostitute quit working near the harbor shortly afterward. Over the next several years, similar reports appeared intermittently, always at night, always near water, always involving silence. Witnesses described the same gesture: 2 fingers to the lips, a point toward the pier, no words. In each instance, a drowning followed within days. None of the victims were officially connected. Different ages, different backgrounds, no obvious pattern beyond location. Evelyn Frank was never formally linked to these deaths. She was never charged with anything. She was never questioned again after the original case closed. Her name appears in no recent records. What remains are the testimonies, the patterns, the gestures. Evelyn Frank never spoke again. It appears she no longer needs to. Silence, in the end, learned how to point. I volunteer once a week at a community center on the edge of town, the kind of place that smells faintly like old carpet and brewed coffee no matter how many times the floors are cleaned. It's mostly seniors, exercise classes, bingo nights, tech help for phones they insist are perfectly fine, even when the screens are cracked beyond recognition. My role is unglamorous. I stack chairs, I refill coffee urns, I help people reset passwords they swear they've never changed. I show up, I do what's needed, and I leave. Nothing about the place ever felt strange before that evening. It was a Tuesday, late autumn, the kind of night where the sun disappears earlier than your body expects. The coordinator asked if I could help clear out one of the storage rooms after activities wrapped up. Nothing urgent, she said. Just boxes that hadn't been touched in years. Make some space. The storage room was tucked behind the main hall, past a door most people assumed was locked. It wasn't. It just opened into a narrow space lined with metal shelving and mismatched plastic bins. The overhead lights hummed faintly when I flipped them on. Most of the contents were exactly what you'd expect. Old board games with missing pieces. Seasonal decorations faded from too many years in cardboard boxes. A karaoke machine so dented and scratched it looked like it had survived multiple moves and at least one argument. I worked my way down the shelves, sorting what could be tossed and what might still be useful. Near the bottom, half hidden behind a stack of cracked plastic bins, was one container that felt oddly heavier than the rest. Inside it, beneath a pile of yellowed folders, was a single laminated sheet of paper. No binder, no label, just loose, like someone had slid it in there and hoped it would disappear. The title was centered at the top, in plain black text, "Instructions for Room Use, After Hours." I smiled to myself. It had that look, simple font, no letterhead, that screamed either internal memo or joke. I assumed it was something old, maybe from a past coordinator who took their job too seriously. Then I read it. Turn off the main lights. Leave the desk lamp on. Do not sit in the red chair. If you hear someone testing the microphone, do not respond. At 8:40 p.m., check the clock. If it reads 8:41, leave immediately. That was it. No explanation, no signature, no footer. I actually laughed out loud. It was so on-the-nose creepy, it felt intentional. Like someone trying to spook the next person who cleaned out the room. I carried the sheet out to the front desk where the coordinator was finishing paperwork. "Hey," I said, holding it up, "is this some kind of prank?" She took it from me, read it once, and frowned. Not confused, not amused, tired. "That's old," she said, and handed it back. "You can throw it away." "Old how?" I asked. She hesitated, just long enough for the pause to register. Then she shrugged. "Before my time." That was the end of the conversation. She went back to her paperwork. I went back to the storage room, the laminated sheet still in my hand. I didn't throw it away. I slipped it into my backpack instead, intending to show it to a friend later. Something about the coordinator's reaction stuck with me. Not alarm, avoidance. That night, I stayed late helping clean the main hall, folding tables, stacking chairs, wiping down surfaces. Everyone else left around 8:15, waving goodbye and wishing me a good night. I was alone in the building. I remembered the laminated sheet and felt a little embarrassed for having kept it. Internet brain, I told myself, reading too much into nothing. At 8:39, I checked my phone. 8:39 p.m. I glanced up at the wall clock across the hall. 8:40, the main lights were off. I froze, one hand still resting on the back of a chair. I was certain I hadn't turned them off. I would have remembered flipping that switch. But the hall was dim now, lit only by the desk lamp near the front office, its warm circle of light spilling into the otherwise shadowed space. I felt a small, irrational tightening in my chest. Then I noticed the red chair. It was one of those padded folding chairs, vinyl seat, metal legs. We had dozens of them. This one was positioned near the back wall, slightly apart from the others. I didn't remember putting it there. The PA system clicked just once. A soft, dull thump, exactly like someone tapping a microphone to see if it was live. Hello? My brain wanted to say. I didn't. I suddenly became acutely aware of how quiet the building was. Not just empty, held, like sound itself was waiting to see what I would do next. I looked at the clock again. 8:41. The instructions surfaced in my mind with uncomfortable clarity. If it reads 8:41, leave immediately. I didn't run. I didn't feel panicked. I felt guided, like staying would be impolite, like I'd overstayed my welcome somewhere I hadn't realized I'd been invited. I grabbed my jacket and keys and walked out the front door, locking it behind me with hands that didn't quite feel like mine. The air outside felt sharper, colder. The parking lot was empty. My car sat under a flickering light. I drove home without turning on the radio. The next week, I came back for my usual shift. The storage room had been reorganized. The shelves were cleaner. The bins were labeled. The one I'd found the laminated sheet in was gone entirely. I asked the coordinator about it while we were setting up chairs. "Oh, we don't use that room after hours anymore," she said casually. "Why?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She stacked 2 chairs, adjusted them, then looked at me. "People kept not following instructions," she said. My mouth felt dry. "What instructions?" She studied my face for a long moment, as if measuring something. Then she smiled. "You did, though," she said. "That's good. I still volunteer there. I still make coffee and help reset phones and stack chairs, but I never stay past 8:30, and sometimes, usually when I'm not looking for it, I notice a single red chair already set aside at the back of the hall. Not placed wrong, placed deliberately, like it's waiting for someone who doesn't read signs, or someone who thinks instructions are just suggestions." In March 1912, 3 men died in a small tent on the Antarctic ice. They were not lost. They were not wandering aimlessly. They were not chasing a final reckless goal. They were resting, waiting, just 11 miles from a supply depot that could have saved their lives. This was the end of the British Antarctic expedition led by Robert Falcon Scott, and it remains one of the clearest demonstrations of how survival can fail even when nearly every major decision is reasonable. Scott's party reached the South Pole on January 17, 1912. They were not the first. The Norwegian expedition under Roald Amundsen had arrived more than a month earlier and left behind a tent and a note confirming it. Scott recorded the moment in his journal without dramatics. There was disappointment, but no debate about what came next. They turned back immediately. Well, that was the correct choice. The expedition had always been planned around the return. Supplies were limited. The men were already weakened by months of hauling sledges across polar terrain. There was no strategic value in lingering at the pole. Every hour spent there only increased the risk. At first, the retreat followed expectations. Progress was slow but measurable. Distances were covered, depots were reached, food was consumed according to schedule. The system was functioning, barely but adequately. Then the environment shifted. Temperatures dropped well below seasonal averages. The cold was not merely uncomfortable. It changed how everything worked. Fuel thickened and froze, making it difficult to melt snow for water. Hunger intensified as rations were cut to stretch supplies. Frostbite spread through fingers and toes. Fine motor skills disappeared. Decisions that once took seconds required effort. Fatigue became cumulative. Every task cost more than it returned. Edgar Evans deteriorated first. He had suffered injuries earlier in the journey and began to show signs of confusion. His coordination failed. He fell behind. In February, he collapsed and died on the ice. The remaining 4 men continued, knowing that stopping would only compound the loss. Among them was Lawrence Oates. Oates's feet were badly frostbitten. Walking caused severe pain. He slowed the group with every step. No one blamed him. No one needed to say what everyone already understood. On March 16th, during a blizzard, Oates made his decision. He left the tent, stating calmly that he was just going outside and maybe some time. He knew exactly what it meant. His intention was not heroic in the romantic sense. It was practical. Removing his burden gave the others a chance. The others did not stop him. They could not. Scott and the remaining 2 men, Henry Bowers and Edward Wilson, continued south. They were closer than ever. 1 Ton Depot, a cache of food and fuel laid earlier in the expedition, was just 11 miles away. Under normal conditions, it was a distance that could be crossed in a day. Normal conditions did not return. A prolonged blizzard settled over the region. Wind, snow, and extreme cold made movement impossible. The men were trapped inside their tent. Fuel was exhausted. Food was nearly gone. Even standing risked collapse. Scott continued to write. His journal entries during this period are not panicked. They are precise, observational, and increasingly resigned. He records the weather. He records their condition. He acknowledges the situation without attempting to dramatize it. His final entry is dated March 29, 1912. After that, there is silence. When a search party reached the site months later, they found the tent still standing. Inside were the bodies of Scott, Wilson, and Bowers. They had not scattered. They had not made a final attempt to crawl toward the depot. They had followed the logic of survival, conserve energy, wait for conditions to improve. The conditions never did. Scott's expedition is often framed as a story of failure, of outdated planning, misjudged logistics, or national pride overtaking pragmatism. Those critiques are not entirely wrong, but they simplify what actually happened. Scott did not die because of one catastrophic mistake. He did not ignore warning signs. He did not push forward when he should have turned back. He turned back. He rationed. He adjusted. He waited. And still, the margin between survival and death vanished. Antarctica does not negotiate. It does not reward effort or intention. It does not care how close you are to safety. Distance on a map does not translate to distance on the ice, and time does not behave the way it does elsewhere. 11 miles became an uncrossable void. There is no mystery surrounding the deaths of Scott and his men. No unanswered questions about cause. Cold, starvation, immobility, and weather were enough. What remains unsettling is not how they died, but when. They were close. They were disciplined. They were experienced. They were simply too late. Scott's final expedition stands as a reminder that survival is not always earned. Sometimes, the environment decides the outcome long before the people inside it understand that the decision has already been made. And when that happens, there is nothing left to do but wait. I recently learned that my entire relationship was a lie. Not the small kind of lie you excuse or explain away, not misunderstandings or bad timing or two people growing apart. I mean a complete fabrication, built carefully, patiently, and deliberately around me. Before I say anything else, I need to be clear about one thing. I am not suicidal. I never have been. I've never been diagnosed with a mental illness, and I've never harmed myself. What I'm about to describe is not a breakdown or a delusion. It is my account of what I believed was a loving relationship and what it turned out to be instead. When we met, he was 25. I had graduated high school a year earlier and was still trying to figure out who I was. Looking back, I know I was vulnerable in ways I didn't recognize at the time. We met at a frat party, one of those loud, overcrowded nights where nothing meaningful is supposed to happen. Except it did. The moment I saw him, everything else seemed to dull around the edges. He stood alone near the kitchen, calm, observant, watching the room instead of participating in it. He noticed me too. After a while, he approached holding 2 drinks. I hesitated long enough that he noticed and smiled in a way that felt disarming rather than threatening. He joked, drank from both glasses to prove they were safe, and handed one back to me. It worked. I relaxed. We talked for over an hour. He asked questions and listened closely. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak, but focused, patient attention. I told him where I grew up, what school I attended, why I was at the party. He absorbed it all. At one point, he leaned back and said something strange. "That's how it's supposed to happen," he said. "Every choice you ever made brought you right here." I brushed it off. People say things like that when they're tipsy. When my friends left, I stayed. Eventually, we ended up leaving together. I don't remember the walk clearly. I remember flashes, laughing, stumbling, his hand steadying me. When we reached his place, everything escalated quickly. I was drunk, but I was conscious and willing. I hadn't felt safe with a man in a long time, and that night I let myself believe I was. The next morning, regret hit me hard. I left quietly while he slept and went home, promising myself it was a mistake I'd forget. By early afternoon, I was trying to focus on schoolwork when someone started pounding on my door. It was him. I'm standing there with flowers and chocolates, smiling like he'd rehearsed it. I tried to close the door. He stopped it with his foot, not aggressively but insistently, and asked for a sober chance. Just one. I told him I had work to do. He suggested dinner. I countered with a walk in the park. He agreed immediately. Only later did I realize I'd never told him my address. That evening went smoothly. Too smoothly. He talked about his job in digital security, his interests, his plans. When the conversation turned to my ex, I shared more than I meant to. I admitted the relationship hadn't been safe, that there had been violence. His reaction unsettled me. He didn't console me. He got angry, not at what happened, but at the idea of it. He said no man should ever touch a woman like me. When I corrected him, the intensity vanished, replaced by warmth and apology. I ignored the unease. Within weeks, we were officially together. For a while, things felt good until my ex died. The news came through social media. Suicide, a note. No one blamed anyone. I cried anyway. Grief doesn't ask permission. My boyfriend didn't like that. He became colder, dismissive. He called it deserved. said I shouldn't waste tears. Over time, his anger found new outlets: walls, furniture, silence, then apologies, then gifts, then love bombing, then control. I felt trapped. One night, drunk, he said something I couldn't ignore, that it was good my ex was gone. I left and stayed with my mother. When I came back, he was gone. He left a note saying he wouldn't be back until late. I slept better that night than I had in months. Weeks later, after barely speaking, he came home early carrying a wrapped gift. I told him I didn't want it and went upstairs. He left without saying a word. He never came back. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the gift. Inside was a new laptop and a USB drive. On it were hundreds of files, screenshots of my social media, photos of me taken before we met, videos, security footage from inside my home, from before I ever knew him. Then I found the last video. It was filmed in my ex's garage. I watched him being forced into frame at gunpoint. I heard the rehearsed words. I watched the chair kick away. I watched the life leave his body. Then my boyfriend stepped into view and spoke directly to the camera. "He can't hurt you anymore," he said. "No one ever will again." That was last week. The police have everything now: the laptop, the drive, the footage. He's wanted. I don't know where he is. All I know is that the relationship I believed I had never existed. It was surveillance. It was preparation. It was control disguised as fate. And if he isn't stopped, it won't end with me. I've always had this habit of falling into other people's beliefs, the way some people fall into TV shows. I don't mean I casually read an article and move on. I mean I get stuck. I find a phrase or a ritual or a symbol, and it sits in my head like a song you can't stop humming. I'll look up one thing and suddenly it's 3 a.m., and I have 20 tabs open and my eyes are burning, but I still feel like I'm only one more click away from understanding what someone else once understood. I used to tell myself it was harmless, curiosity, a love of history, a way to feel connected to something older than my own small life. But there's a difference between curiosity and hunger, and I didn't notice when it turned into the second one. It started with a conversation that shouldn't have mattered. I was visiting my great-aunt on a quiet afternoon. She's the kind of older relative who still believes in handwritten recipes and keeps extra blankets folded on the back of the couch, even in summer. Her house always smells faintly like soap and dried flowers. It's not a dramatic place. It's the kind of place where time moves a little slower and nothing terrible should happen. We were talking about nothing important: weather, work, the state of the world. Eventually, the conversation drifted to the way people believe strange things without realizing how strange they sound to anyone else. I mentioned some cult I'd been reading about, one of those groups with symbols and coded language and rules about food and sleep. I expected her to laugh or tell me to stop filling my head with nonsense. Instead, she went quiet. It was a small pause, but it had weight. She looked down into her cup like she'd found something at the bottom and didn't want to show me. "What?" I asked, and I tried to sound light, like I hadn't noticed. She took a sip and set the cup down slowly. "My father," she said. "He had old beliefs." That phrasing snagged me. Old beliefs, not religion, not superstition, beliefs. "Like what?" I asked. She shook her head. "He never called it anything. He'd say it was just lifestyle differences, simple things." "Simple like what?" I pressed, smiling as if it was a fun story. But she didn't smile back. Her eyes looked tired in a way I couldn't place. "He only mentioned it once," she said, "when I asked him about church. He said he didn't need church. Well, he said some things don't want to be named." I felt that little spark in my brain, the one that always lights up when I hear a sentence that doesn't fit with the rest of normal life. It wasn't fear, it was interest. I leaned forward without meaning to. "Did he have books?" I asked. "Did he do rituals?" Her mouth tightened like she regretted even bringing it up. "I don't know. I didn't want to know. I left home as soon as I could. When they died, the house came to me. I keep it up, but I never went through everything." "What about the basement?" I asked too fast. She gave me a look, and for a second I thought she might tell me to drop it. Instead, she sighed, a long sound like someone letting go of something they've been holding for years. "The basement is untouched," she said. "If you really want to look, you can. Maybe it'll get it out of your system." I laughed. I said something like, "I'm not going to summon anything, I promise," because that's what you say when you want to keep things in the realm of jokes. But when I left her house that day, the thought didn't go with me like a joke. It followed me home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not the normal kind of insomnia where you're restless, and you check your phone and you roll over and you eventually drift off. This was different. It felt like my mind had been propped open. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see her expression when she said, "Some things don't want to be named." It made no sense, but I started to feel like if I didn't find out what he believed, the not knowing would grow until it ate up everything else. I called her the next morning, trying to pretend I was casual about it. She sounded more awake than I expected, like she'd been waiting for my call. "I don't know much," she said. "I never asked, but if you want to look, you can. Just don't get yourself worked up over it." I promised I wouldn't. I meant it. I genuinely thought I meant it. I drove over the next day. She made tea while I was there. Lavender, warm and sweet. It calmed my nerves in a way I didn't even know needed calming. "That's nice," I told her, and I meant it. "It was my father's," she said. "Well, his idea. He learned a recipe somewhere and then changed it. Said it helped settle the mind." A recipe somewhere. The way she said it made it sound like he'd learned it from someone you don't meet at a grocery store. I didn't comment. I just thanked her and followed her to the basement door. When she opened it, stale air moved up the stairs like a breath. The basement wasn't a horror movie basement. No dripping pipes, no chains, no mysterious altar in the middle of the floor. It looked like what it was, a storage space that hadn't been touched in a long time. Dust, cobwebs, old boxes, bags of clothes, Christmas decorations that had probably belonged to people who weren't alive anymore. I felt silly for expecting anything dramatic. Then I saw the carpet. It was an old carpet, worn thin in spots, but woven through it were threads that caught the light like dull gold. Not bright like jewelry, more like something mineral, something pulled from earth. The sight of it gave me a weird jolt, like a memory of a place I'd never been. I started going through the boxes. It was mostly ordinary, old photo albums, broken lamps, clothes with yellowed collars, a board game with missing pieces, the kind of junk families collect without realizing it. I was about to give up when I noticed a bookshelf against the back wall. It was huge and dark, and it didn't belong in a basement full of plastic bins. It was carved with a crest, a tree with twisting vines that ran down the sides of the shelf, like it was growing into the wood. The books on it were mostly about nature, earth science, wildlife, oceans. There were entire volumes on birds, on mammals, on forests, the kind of books you'd find in an old school library. And then I saw the marks. Some books had dark streaks across the covers and spines. At first I thought they were water stains, but when I got closer, I realized they were drawn on. Charcoal, maybe. Thick black swirls and straight lines, as if someone had dragged burnt wood across the covers in patterns that weren't random but also weren't readable in any human language. The marks were worse on the ocean books. Books about crabs and jellyfish were covered in curved strokes. One book about squid and octopus looked like it had been attacked by someone with obsessive hands. The swirls clustered like storms. The longer I stared, the more my eyes tried to turn them into something familiar. Letters, shapes, faces. My brain kept reaching for meaning the way your tongue reaches for a sore tooth. I had that same feeling I get sometimes when I'm alone at night and I suddenly become aware of the house settling, an awareness that something is there even if you can't prove it. I looked up, and on the very top shelf, buried under dust, it was a single laminated-looking sheet of paper with a faint shimmer of gold along the edges. I dragged over an old chair and climbed up to reach it. The paper was heavier than normal paper, stiffer. The gold along the edges wasn't ink. It looked pressed into the fibers like tiny flakes. Written in the center was one sentence: "That is not dead which can eternal lie." It wasn't the kind of thing you find in family storage. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a quote you put on a mug. I felt my throat tighten for no reason. I took pictures of everything: the bookshelf, the charcoal books, the paper. I told myself it was just documentation, just curiosity. Then I folded the paper carefully and put it in my pocket. Upstairs, my aunt was rinsing cups. When I showed her the paper, her expression didn't change much. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look amused. "That's old," she said. "Old like how old?" She shrugged. "Before my time. Just throw it away if it bothers you." Her tone was calm, but her fingers moved faster as she dried the dishes, like she wanted to end the conversation. I didn't throw it away. When I got home, I cleared off my desk and pinned the pictures up. I moved aside notes from a previous obsession, another case, another thread, another thing I'd convinced myself I could solve from a distance. I made space like this new thing deserved its own territory. I searched the sentence online. Nothing useful, or rather too many useless results, all repeating each other without reaching the core of it. What bothered me most wasn't that I couldn't find answers. It was the way the paper itself seemed intentional. The gold, the texture, the way it caught light. I stared at it for hours. My eyes kept returning to the gold swirls near the edges. They weren't random decoration. They curved in the same direction, always pulling inward, like a spiral drawn by someone with a steady hand. At some point, I held the paper up to my computer screen, letting the white light shine through it. The center, which I'd assumed was blank, darkened slightly. Two shapes appeared, not ink, not printed, eyes. They didn't look like human eyes, too wide, too still, more like the suggestion of something watching from behind a membrane. I dropped the paper like it had burned me. I told myself it was just a watermark, a trick of light, a pattern in the fibers, but my pulse didn't care what I told myself. I looked back at the pictures of the bookshelf. So many ocean books, so many sea creatures, so much attention paid to things that live where light doesn't. I started searching for obscure cult references tied to oceans and old phrases. I went deeper than I normally do, clicking into old forums, archived articles, scanned PDFs that looked like they'd been typed on machines older than my parents. The same reference kept appearing, always vague, always half dismissed. Something about people who worshipped what lived beneath the surface. Something about the deep. I didn't name it out loud. I didn't want to. Names have power, even if you don't believe they do. At around 4 a.m., exhausted and wired, I finally fell asleep with the paper still pinned above my desk. The dream came so fast it felt like I hadn't even closed my eyes. Pressure filled my chest, not pain, weight, the sensation of being pressed from all sides like deep water. My lungs panicked. I opened my eyes, certain I was going to drown. Instead, I was standing in a forest under a sky full of stars. A shoreline was visible ahead, black water stretching out like oil. Somewhere nearby, a fire burned low, and around it were figures. They were chanting. The words were broken, unfamiliar, but my mind clung to them like it recognized the rhythm. Funglui. The moment I heard it, my hand moved. I wrote it into my palm with a pen that was suddenly in my coat pocket, as if my brain had prepared for this. Then the chanting stopped. Every head turned toward me. I ran. The trees thinned into an open stretch of rocky shore. I could hear movement behind me, fast, purposeful. I could see the orange wobble of firelight between trunks. I didn't know where to hide except the water. I slipped into the ocean. Cold, biting instantly through my clothes. I held my breath and sank down, letting black water close over my head. The torchlight moved closer to the shore. I stayed still, chest burning, muscles trembling. Then something shifted beneath me, not like a fish, not like a current. It felt like the water itself changed direction, like something enormous had rolled in the dark and all the pressure in the sea had moved with it. A sound rose through the water, not a voice, not exactly, but a slow force, like a thought pushing against my skull from the outside. I broke for the surface and clawed my way onto jagged rocks. When I looked down at my hands, the flesh was wrong. Not missing, but opened. Deep cuts where skin should have been intact. Blood running down my fingers, thick and hot, against the cold night air. The pain hit late, blooming white and sickening. I bit down on my arm to keep from screaming. Then I heard a crack behind me, close enough to feel like a branch snapping beside my ear. I spun and woke up in my bed, gasping, drenched in sweat, the taste of salt in my mouth like I'd been submerged. My hands were on the sheets. They were bleeding. In the dim light, I saw the cuts. Deep, clean enough to be deliberate, carved into the skin of my palm. My fingers were cramped around a small penknife. I didn't remember picking it up. I didn't remember doing anything except dreaming. Carved into my hand, letter by letter, was the same word from the chant. Funglui. I stumbled into the bathroom and turned on the light. The blood looked too real. The pain was too real. I poured peroxide over the cuts and nearly blacked out from the sting. I wrapped my hand in bandages with shaking fingers, staring at the word like it might blink. And despite the fear, a part of me felt something else under it. Relief, like I had finally been given proof that this wasn't just in my head. The next morning I called my aunt again and told her I wanted to look through the basement more. My voice sounded normal. I forced it to. She didn't ask why. She just said, "Sure," like she'd known I would come back. This time I brought a trash bag and I started gathering anything that seemed connected. The charcoal books, the paper, the smaller clothes I hadn't noticed before, shirts and pants that looked like they belonged to someone younger, their pockets filled with dried bits of herbs, lavender, sage, things that smell nice when you want to convince yourself you're safe. When I lifted the last book from the shelf, I noticed a gap behind it, a dark hole where the back of the shelf didn't sit flush against the wall. My injured hand throbbed as I pressed my fingers into the crack and pulled. The shelf shifted with a groan of old wood. Behind it, the wall was covered in writing. The same phrase over and over, uneven and frantic, like someone had written it in a hurry, in the dark, with their mind on something else. Mulwunaf. Hundreds of times. I copied it down, my heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. Now I had 2 words, 2 keys, 2 steps in a chant I didn't understand but couldn't stop thinking about. I went home and tore through the charcoal books, page by page, ignoring the way my hand ached through the bandage. On the inside cover of one ocean volume, scrawled in green pen, was a longer line. Iuli Ugah Nuggle Ftang. It appeared in every marked book, always in the same shaky handwriting, like a signature. I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. My mind kept trying to align them, the way you try to fit puzzle pieces together, even when you don't have the picture on the box. I searched online for meanings. I found discussions, fragments, arguments, people pretending they knew what it meant. Nothing solid, nothing satisfying. The frustration made my skin crawl. It felt wrong that no one knew, or worse, that no one cared. I checked the clock. It was late. Too late. I climbed into bed with my phone still open, the words glowing on my screen. I told myself I'd stop. I told myself I'd take a break. My mouth moved before I decided to. Fenglui. The word felt familiar on my tongue, like I'd said it 1,000 times in some other life. Sleep took me like a hand around my throat. I woke in a forest again, but this time the trees were barren and the darkness beyond them wasn't night, it was absence. No insects, no wind, no distant animal calls. The world felt paused, like something was listening for the next sound. I looked down, and instead of leaves and soil, I saw the basement carpet beneath my feet, the same gold-threaded carpet. I crouched, fingers trembling, and lifted it. Beneath it was bare earth, dark and damp. The chanting began, fractured, incomplete, slipping in and out like a radio station you can't quite tune. Fenglui, Mungwunaf, Fenglui, Mungwunaf. There was a missing piece, a gap that made my teeth ache. I dug into the dirt with both hands like an animal. My nails caught on rock and peeled. But the pain didn't stop me. It barely registered. It was like my body had accepted that it needed to do this. My fingers closed around something cold and slick. I yanked it free. A small idol, seafoam colored, coated in mud and blood, shaped in curves that didn't match any animal I'd ever seen on land. It smelled of salt so strongly it made my stomach twist. As I held it, a word pushed itself into my mind with awful clarity. Cthulhu. I woke with salt in my mouth again, my sheets damp, my breathing ragged. The dream clung to me like wet clothes. In daylight it should have felt less real. It didn't. The idol wasn't in my bed. That part wasn't real. But the sense of needing it was. I went back to the bookshelf photos. I went back to the charcoal books. I laid them out around me on the floor like I was building something. I closed my eyes and let the words repeat in my head. Fenglui Mgluanaf Relie Wuganagal Tan. My hands moved on their own, arranging the books, aligning the markings, matching curves to curves. When I opened my eyes, the swirls on the covers formed a complete symbol, a shape that made my brain recoil and lean in at the same time. Fish-like, ancient, a face suggested by lines that shouldn't be able to suggest a face. I used an old cipher I'd developed for a previous obsession, something I'd once been proud of because it made me feel clever and in control. I applied it to the words without thinking too hard about whether I should. The meaning slid into place so neatly, it made me nauseous. In his house at Relia, dead Cthulhu waits, dreaming. I didn't feel horror the way I expected. I felt recognition. That's what scared me most. I called my aunt and told her I was coming over. I didn't ask. I just told her. My voice sounded calm even though my hands were shaking. When I arrived, she offered tea again. Lavender. The same recipe. The same soothing smell that now felt like a lure. I went straight to the basement and lifted the carpet. Under it, tucked against the floor like it had been left there for me, was a faded photograph of a tree. Lavender bloomed at its base in the picture, lush and impossible. The gold thread in the carpet caught the light as if it approved. I brought the photo upstairs to my aunt. Her face softened when she saw it, and for the first time she looked genuinely happy. "Oh," she said quietly, touched. "That tree. My father used to pick lavender for me there. It always smelled so strong, like you couldn't escape it." I asked her where it was. She gave me directions without hesitation, like she'd been waiting for the question her whole life. I drove as if I was late for something I couldn't miss. The smell of lavender began to seep into the car long before I reached the place, even with the windows shut. I told myself it was in my head. I told myself it was because I'd been handling dried herbs, but the scent grew thicker, sweeter, almost wet. I parked and followed it into the woods. The walk was longer than I expected. The daylight shifted and faded. I didn't stop. I barely noticed when my feet started to hurt. I didn't notice the blood until I saw it on a rock and realized it came from me. By sunrise on the second day, I found the tree. It was old and split, its bark rough and scarred, and at its base lavender grew in stubborn clusters, purple against dark soil. The smell hit me like a hand over my mouth. I knelt. The ground felt soft, almost warm. I dug. This time my nails didn't break. They felt sharper, harder, like they'd been filed down into points. When I looked at them, they seemed wrong. Too curved, too thick, the color slightly off, like bone under skin. I didn't question it. I didn't have room for doubt anymore. After 2 hours, my fingers struck something solid. I pulled it up, and my stomach tightened with a sense of completion. The idol. Not a dream version, not an image in my head. Something physical, cold, slick with mud. I cradled it close like it could hear my heartbeat. Rain started, heavy and sudden, drumming through the branches and soaking my clothes in minutes. The lavender scent rose with the wet earth until it filled my lungs. I cut my hand on purpose. Be careful not to slice the palm where the carved word still sat beneath scar tissue. My blood mixed with the dirt, darkening it. The idol grew slicker in my grip, as if it drank. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt something press back against my mind. Not a voice, not a sentence, a presence, vast and patient, like something dreaming that briefly rolled over in its sleep. I talked to it the way you talk to someone you trust when you're exhausted. I told it I was here. I told it I understood. I told it I was sorry it had been buried. The rain soaked through my clothes until my skin felt numb. My feet were shredded from walking, but the pain dulled strangely, like my body was already changing how it processed what hurt. By the time I reached my car, I could barely stand. The cuts on my feet felt thick, strange. I looked down and saw skin that didn't look like skin anymore. Patches hardened, textured, faintly scaled. I drove home anyway. I didn't go inside. I went straight to my basement. I locked the door behind me and sat on the floor with the idol in my lap. The concrete felt cold, but beneath it I sensed earth waiting, the way a lake waits beneath winter ice. Cracks appeared along the edges of the basement floor like hairline fractures spreading slowly. Vines pushed up through them, pale at first and then green, threading into the air. The smell of lavender returned, stronger than ever, sweet enough to make my head swim. I lay back. The ground beneath me softened, not like quicksand, not like collapse, but like something choosing to open. I didn't fight it. I let the earth take me the way water takes a sinking stone. I don't know how long I lay there, half listening to the house above me, to the distant, normal sounds of the world continuing without my permission. I held the idol to my chest and waited. I awaited the dream ending, not with fear, but with the terrible calm of someone who has finally stopped pretending they can turn back. Story 8. I didn't realize how often I agreed to things until I started finding proof that I had, and no memory of doing it. It started small. At first, I thought I was just tired, the normal kind of tired that creeps in when work bleeds into evenings and weekends, when you start measuring your life in deadlines instead of days. I'd open my email and see a reply already sent. I'd glance at my calendar and notice blocks of time filled with meetings I didn't remember scheduling, but I told myself it was normal. Everyone forgets things. Everyone runs on autopilot sometimes. The problem wasn't just that I couldn't remember saying yes. The problem was that everyone else believed I already had. I've always been known as someone who handles things well. That's the reputation I built, piece by piece, over years of never saying no out loud. At work, I'm dependable, efficient. The person managers mention when something breaks 5 minutes before a deadline. I don't complain. I don't miss timelines. I don't fall apart in front of other people. I learned early that competence makes people comfortable. And when people are comfortable, they stop looking too closely. Last quarter, the CEO mentioned me in a company-wide email, praised my consistency, my unshakable reliability. Those were the words he used. Unshakable, reliable. People congratulated me for weeks. Some stopped by my desk just to say how deserved it was. A few joked that they wished they could clone me. I smiled through all of it. Inside, it felt like something heavy was being pressed down on my chest, slowly, steadily, without ever letting up. The first thing I noticed clearly was my calendar. One morning, I logged in and saw a meeting marked urgent, early, with a department I barely interacted with. I stared at it longer than I should have, waiting for the memory to rise up. Some flash of agreeing, some moment of context. Nothing came. I told myself I must have accepted it late the night before. I'd been exhausted. Burnout messes with your memory. Everyone had been telling me I was taking on too much anyway. The meeting happened. I attended. I spoke. I answered questions. People nodded. They thanked me, looked relieved. I took notes that made sense when I reviewed them later. Then more meetings appeared. Projects I didn't remember agreeing to. Deadlines stacked so tightly that I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. Emails thanking me for stepping up again or saving the day. Every time I doubted myself, I checked my sent folder. There was proof. My words, my writing style, calm, professional, reassuring, confident in a way I didn't feel anymore. No hesitation, no questions, no pushback. Reading those emails felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, like listening to a recording of my own voice saying things I knew I didn't believe, like watching someone else wear my face. The work kept getting done. That was the worst part. Every task completed on time, every problem resolved, every presentation polished and approved. My performance metrics stayed perfect. My reviews glowed even brighter than before. Managers started looping me into things automatically. Decisions were made with the assumption that I'd handle them, that I always did. I should have felt proud. That's what success is supposed to feel like. Instead, every accomplishment felt like something was being taken from me, like each finished task carved out a little more space where I used to be. The more competent I appeared, the less room there was for me to exist inside my own life. I tried to push back once. A new project landed in my inbox, one that would stretch my schedule past anything reasonable. I walked over to a coworker I trusted and told her, carefully, that I didn't remember agreeing to it. She frowned, surprised, and pulled up her email. She said, turning the screen toward me. You did. There it was, a clear confirmation. My name, my words. My stomach tightened so hard it hurt. She didn't look away right away. Her eyes flicked from the screen back to my face, and she hesitated. Are you okay? She asked. No offense, but you look more ragged than usual. I tried to answer. I really did. The words were there. I could feel them pressing up behind my teeth. All I needed was to let them out. She spoke again, quieter this time. You don't have to handle everything, you know. You're not a superhero. For a moment, it felt like the room leaned toward me. Like if I could just say one honest thing, something might crack open. Something might slow down. But my mouth wouldn't cooperate. The silence stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable. She cleared her throat. He looked back at her monitor and added, "Just let me know if you need help." Her fingers were already moving over the keyboard. The conversation was over. The project was still mine. After that, the gaps started getting worse. I wasn't blacking out. It wasn't dramatic, no collapsing, no waking up on the floor, just missing pieces, little slices of time that vanished without warning. I'd open my laptop to start an assignment and realize it was already finished. Not roughly done, but complete, clean, ready to send. I'd skim documents I didn't remember writing and somehow know exactly why each section existed, what it was meant to accomplish, how it fit into the larger picture. I'd join meetings and feel like they were already halfway over before I said a word. People would reference things I apparently had already explained. It felt like being pushed behind glass. I could see everything clearly. I could hear it. But when I reached out, my hands hit something solid and invisible. I went to the doctor. I rehearsed what I wanted to say on the drive there. The missing time, the pressure behind my eyes, the feeling that my body was moving faster than my thoughts, like something else had learned how to operate me better than I ever could. She listened politely, nodding as she scrolled through my chart. When I finished, she said, "According to your records, you haven't reported any distress." I blinked. "I'm reporting it now," I tried to say. I opened my mouth. The words crowded my chest, urgent and desperate, pushing upward, but nothing came out. My throat tightened, my jaw locked. Panic surged, sudden and sharp, the way it does when you realize you can't breathe properly. I tried again, forcing air, forcing sound. Nothing. It was like screaming in a vacuum. The doctor smiled gently, already turning back to her screen. "Stress can manifest in many ways," she said, "but everything here looks stable. If anything changes," she added, "just reach out." I nodded. I don't remember deciding to. After that, people stopped asking how I was. Why would they? Everything about me said I was thriving. My output increased. My responsiveness improved. I was always available, always calm. More responsibility flowed toward me like water downhill. More trust, more praise. My name became shorthand for a problem being solved. "Give it to him," I heard someone say once. "He'll handle it." The recognition kept coming. So did the pressure. It felt like being stretched thinner and thinner, while everyone applauded how well I was holding my shape. One night, I decided not to answer an email. Just one. A small thing. A low-risk task that could wait until morning. I stared at the screen, felt my heart pounding like I was doing something dangerous, something forbidden. Minutes passed. Then an hour. An automated reminder went out. Then another. Then a confirmation email appeared in the thread, sent from my account, accepting the task and apologizing for the delay. I hadn't moved. My hands were still in my lap. It didn't matter. The work still got done. That was when the fear stopped being abstract. I started paying attention to my body, to the way my hands hovered over the keyboard before my mind caught up, and to the way my mouth formed familiar reassurances before I'd decided what I wanted to say. It wasn't like being possessed. There was no sense of another presence, no voice, no commands, just momentum. Patterns learned so well they no longer needed me. The last moment I remember clearly, I was alone in my apartment. The lights were off except for the glow of my laptop. A new assignment came in, high priority, tight deadline. I felt the familiar pressure behind my eyes, heavier than ever. My hands moved toward the keyboard. My mind screamed for them to stop. "Please, not this one. Let me say no. Let me say anything." My fingers typed something calm, polite, reassuring. Words I'd used 1,000 times before. Words that didn't belong to me anymore. And then there was stillness. Not darkness, not relief. Just the sense of being fixed in place. Now I watch. I watch myself wake up each morning and log in. I watch my reflection straighten my posture before meetings. I hear my voice speak steadily, confidently, using all the right phrases. Coworkers smile with relief when I join calls. Managers relax when my name appears in an email chain. My body works perfectly. I just don't get a vote anymore. Time keeps moving. Deadlines come and go. Projects begin and end. I don't. My name is still active in every system. My performance remains impeccable. Somewhere right now, another task is being assigned. It's already been accepted, and no one can hear me. I wake up before I surface. That's the first thing that tells me something is wrong. Awareness lags behind motion. My eyes open after my body has already sat up. My lungs are already pulling in air, steady and practiced, like they've done this without me 1,000 times. For a few seconds, I don't know where I am. I only know that I'm here again, wherever here is. The ceiling waits for me, flat, familiar, patient. It knows I'll recognize it soon enough. I stand. I always do. There's no moment where I decide to. My legs swing off the bed and lift me upright with the quiet obedience of machinery. Muscle and bone follow a script they know by heart. I trail after them, delayed, like a shadow that's lost its owner. Each step feels off by a fraction of a second. My foot hits the floor, then the sensation arrives. Movement first, feeling second. Every day begins this way. Get up, function, collapse, repeat. The clock on the wall ticks, and I fixate on it because it gives me something to hate. The second hand jumps forward in sharp, deliberate clicks. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It insists time is moving, that progress is happening. I know better. Time here is thick, sticky, it clings. When I lift my hand in front of my face, it feels like I'm pushing it through water. The air resists me. My fingers flex when I tell them to, but the response feels borrowed, like I'm using someone else's hands. Something is wrong with the way I fit inside myself. The thought doesn't arrive cleanly. None of them do anymore. It seeps in through cracks, through fatigue, through repetition. Thoughts come in herds now, trampling over each other, building pressure behind my eyes. A swelling mass with no clear language. I press my palms to my temples as if I can hold it in. It doesn't help. That's when the sound begins. At first it's barely there, a vibration more than a noise. A hum threaded through my nerves, I almost miss it. Then I realize it's coming from places sound shouldn't reach. My teeth, my bones, the hollow space behind my breastbone. It isn't a voice yet, it's something warming up. Then it speaks. It says my name, not out loud, not fully inside my head either. Somewhere in between, like it's shaking the shape of who I am until the syllables fall loose. Hearing it feels like being exposed, like something has looked directly at me without permission. I tell myself not to respond. I never respond. My body leans forward anyway. Pins ripple across my skin, thousands of them. Not pain. Exactly, more like expectation. Like something waiting at a threshold I can't guard anymore. Goosebumps rise along my arms as if answering a command I didn't hear. I scratch at my forearm. The sensation spreads. The hum swells, turning almost gentle, almost musical. A sick imitation of comfort, a lullaby played by hands that know exactly where to press. It slides along my nerves, plucking them one by one, and every note carries my name. You, it sings. I try to scream. My mouth opens wide. My jaw strains. Nothing comes out the way it should. My throat feels packed, clogged with unsaid things, with grief, with something thick and wet and choking. Tears spill instead, hot and useless, blurring the room. The silence afterward is worse than noise. It's heavy, crushing, absolute. I hear my own heartbeat pounding inside my ears. Then the laughter explodes. It bursts behind my eardrums, sharp and splintering, rattling my skull like it wants to crack it open from the inside. The sound is too close, too intimate. It isn't mocking me, it's enjoying itself. Die, it laughs. The word lands with weight, not a threat, a conclusion, something already decided. My knees buckle. I grab the edge of the table to keep from falling, my fingers slipping, skin slick with sweat. The commands follow: faster now, kill, over and over, until the word loses meaning and becomes rhythm. Kill, 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 kill. It doesn't say who, it doesn't need to. This isn't about action, it's about yielding. Lose grip, lose form, lose the lie that there was ever a clean border between me and it. I feel something peel away inside my chest. Something small, vital. The sense of being singular thins, stretches, tears. Rage floods the space it leaves. Not anger, momentum, a force with no direction, a fire that burns because it exists. I feel myself folding inward, compressing, slipping through layers of memory and resistance I didn't know I still had. I can't stop. I don't remember when stopping stopped being possible. When it finally pulls back, it doesn't say goodbye. It never does. It just withdraws, like a tide receding, leaving wreckage behind. I'm on the floor when I realize it's gone, curled tight, knees to my chest, cheek pressed to cold tile. The room is silent again. The clock ticks, softer now, almost apologetic. My body feels scooped out, hollowed, like something took everything useful and forgot to replace it. I lie there, afraid to move. Afraid movement will summon it back. Afraid staying still will too. I tell myself it's over. I tell myself it always leaves, eventually. I almost believe it. Then my muscles tense. I rise. Again, I am no longer just me. Not in the way I used to understand it. I'm not alone in this body. There are others. Maybe it's we now. Or maybe that word is just another lie. There's me, Evan Marshall. Then there's Daniel Price. And then there's Victor Hale. We don't belong together. There's no reason our thoughts should share space. No logic that explains how we ended up stitched into the same moving shell. And yet, here we are, trapped in the same broken machinery. None of us owns this body anymore. Not really. We orbit it. We take turns. This late afternoon, the reins are loose, sliding from hand to hand. Memories bleed together. Words, images, wants, fear, sensation. Everything dissolves into a shared, the invisible pool that is me and not me, us and not us, whole and fragment at once. Victor is nowhere I can place. Boots, 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 endless boots marching somewhere cold and loud and crowded. 40,000 million boots crushing snow or mud or bone. That's all I get from him. And Daniel, where is he? I think his name without meaning to. I'm here, Evan. The voice comes from the kitchen. My heart slams against my ribs. He shouldn't be able to do that. He isn't real. None of this is supposed to be. My pulse races. My mouth goes dry. Pain flares behind my eyes. In the kitchen, come on. How is he speaking to me? How is he speaking to me when he's just a character I once wrote, a mind I invented? That's on me, he says, like he's answering my thought. All that marching, the cold. You caught it from me. My sickness. Soon you'll hear the boots too, everywhere you go. The taste of coffee burns my tongue. My nose feels dry. The room spins. Did I drink too much again? Again? The question echoes. My legs move without waiting for me. They carry us into the kitchen. Even separated from the sense of ownership, I feel every muscle tighten, every nerve scream. Whatever passes for my soul now feels nauseous, like it's been studded with nails, screaming without a mouth, panicking without words. There's a body on the kitchen floor, blood everywhere, thick, dark, wrong, blood bags, people, everyone, my body, their body, our body. It's smiling. The stench leaking from that grin hits me all at once. Rotten eggs, fish left too long in the sun, manure, the smell of something that should not be breathing, dead death. It moves its mouth, it speaks, I speak. The corpse's face shifts with a wet, grinding crunch. The music, it drags out. We hiss at our own living reflection. Music. What music? Then I hear it, Entelodont playing. The sound crawls through me. I choke on tears I can't control. In the bedroom, I left the recorder running, hidden beneath the pounding rain outside. I know I'm addicted to this sound. to the way it fills the silence. Thunder can't drown what screams inside me. My friend made this music. Funereal sorrow leaks from every note. That's what she calls herself now. An alias meaning fog, borrowed from her family name. She builds soundscapes meant to punish isolation itself. She's an artist. She paints with blood. At first, it was her own. I hated seeing her hurt herself for her work. I told myself I was just worried, just trying to keep her safe. Am I even human anymore? I told myself I was helping, an obsessed admirer maybe. Something worse. I promised her real blood to paint with. That would explain the corpse. I tell myself I wouldn't kill myself. I tell myself that, but the music digs into me. Low frequencies, 19 hertz. Low enough to be felt, not heard. She uses that. It does things to the body, to the mind. I shut it off. Finally, silence. Too quiet, too dark, too cold. I fall, only to rise again. I wake with my head in her lap. She's covered in blood. I want to scream. I don't want to look weak in front of her. She's breathing. I fixate on her chest, rising and falling. All of us do. I look around. That's a mistake. My eyes move too fast. I gag. Oh no. Oh God. She's covered in blood. Is she dead? At my feet lies Mira, my best friend, the love of my life. The person I built my future around. Why? She stirs. We freeze. She looks up, eyes empty, smile stretching too far as she rises in a way no body should. My head pounds, my chest tightens. The artist grabs me. Mira lunges, wrapping herself around me. I can't breathe. Air thins. Darkness presses in. Is this the end? You wish. I wake again, confined, boxed. A coffin. I kick. I scream. They say my name. The dead, the voices, the memories, they claim it. They remember it before I do. I slam my head into the lid. Dark. Wake. Again. In bed. With women. My body moves forward without asking. Motion approved after the fact. Blood. Nightgowns. I turn too fast. A flayed man on the wall. Everything collapses inward. I hit the floor, gasping. Terrified to move. Terrified not to. Both choices already made. I tell myself it's over. That it always stops. That's our favorite lie. I pass out. Wake. Again. No blood now. Bottles everywhere. Vomit stains. A trail leading away. I follow it. Bathroom. A man in the tub. Dead. I look at his face. It makes no sense. Panic gives way to something worse. Pressure. Collapse. Black. Pain. Never the end. I know now. I'll die and wake again. Over and over. We rise. We function. We collapse. Eat. Breed. Die. Repeat. Again and again and again. This is the end of it. The escape from thought, from self, from the curse of awareness. They were right. Eternal recurrence. I couldn't be the only ones left to suffer it. So here we are. Never and always. Again. When I was a kid, my family lived in a house in Grand Junction. I can still picture it in pieces. The shape of the hallway, the way the afternoon light sat on the carpet, the sound the vents made when the heat kicked on. Back then, it was just our house, not a story, not a place you warn people about, just a rental my parents were proud to afford. Before we moved in, the landlord told my mom and dad something they didn't repeat to us until years later. It wasn't said like gossip either. It was said like a rule. There used to be a pool in the backyard. Years earlier, the landlord's little girl drowned in it. The pool hadn't been removed. It had been buried. The concrete shell was still under the dirt. The foundation still there, like a bone under skin. The landlord told my parents the house meant a lot to them, that it was sentimental, and they wanted the property taken care of. They didn't want anything changed, not improved, not updated, not even fixed in the way you might expect. At the time, my sisters and I were too young to understand what any of that meant. My parents were private people anyway. They didn't tell us much, and we didn't ask. Kids don't ask hard questions if the adults act like there's nothing to ask. We just moved in, picked our rooms, learned where the snacks went, and tried to make the new place feel normal. But the backyard never felt normal, even when it looked normal. The grass in most of the yard grew fine, but there was a shape in it, faint but steady, like a scar that wouldn't fade. The outline of a rectangle with rounded corners. In certain light, you could see it better. Like the sun caught it at an angle and made it show. In summer, the lawn would green up, but that shape stayed thin and dull. The grass there always looked tired. In winter, snow melted faster along that outline, as if the ground underneath held cold differently. My dad joked once that the yard was lazy in that spot, like it didn't want to grow. He laughed, and then he stopped laughing quickly, like he'd said something that wasn't meant to be said. If I stood barefoot on that patch, I could feel the concrete under the soil, hard and flat. It wasn't deep, just covered enough that you could pretend it was gone if you didn't look too closely. I didn't know the reason then, but I knew the feeling of that place. I knew the quiet warning in my stomach when I stepped on it. Inside the house, the first strange thing we noticed was the alarm system. It wasn't a normal alarm that just beeped. It had a voice. Whenever a door opened, it chimed and announced which door it was. It did it cheerfully, like it was proud of itself. Ding, ding, front door. Ding, ding, garage door. It sounded silly in the daytime, like a toy. We got used to it fast. It became background noise, part of living there. And because it announced things, it gave you this constant sense that the house was paying attention. The back door had its own label in the system. Pool door. That didn't mean anything to us at first. We didn't have a pool. There was no water back there, just grass and a fence, and the weird patch that never grew right. But the alarm still called it the pool door, like the house was refusing to learn a new name. At night, when the lights were off and the hallway was dark, that label stopped being funny. It started happening after we'd been there long enough to relax, after the boxes were unpacked, after the routines were set, after we'd stopped listening for the sounds of a new house and started sleeping through them. Late at night, the alarm would suddenly speak. Ding, ding, pool door. It didn't just chirp. It announced it clearly, bright and loud, like someone standing in the hallway. Every bedroom in the house was close together. You could hear if someone got up. The floors creaked in the same spots every time. You could hear the bathroom door, the kitchen cabinet, even the fridge opening. We weren't a quiet family, and the house wasn't a quiet house. But on those nights, nobody moved. I would wake up and hold my breath, waiting to hear my dad's footsteps or my mom whispering, waiting to hear one of my sisters giggle like they'd been caught sneaking a snack. Nothing. And then my parents would get up, because parents always do when something in the house announces itself in the dark. I'd hear their door open, their feet on the hall carpet, my dad's tired voice asking, "Who's up?" Then the sound of the back door, and then the quiet that followed when they realized something was wrong. Because the back door would be open, not cracked like it didn't latch. Open, enough that cold air came in, enough that you could smell outside. This didn't happen once. It happened multiple times, always late at night. My dad checked the lock. He checked the frame. He checked the sensor. He made sure it clicked shut. He even put a little piece of tape on the edge once, like a marker to see if it was moving. The next time it happened, the tape was torn. Sometimes it wasn't the pool door. Sometimes it was the garage door. Ding, ding, garage door. Same pattern. No footsteps, no voices. The announcement ringing down the hallway like a small, calm accusation. My dad getting up again. The door found open again. It made my parents tired in a way kids don't understand. When you're a kid, you think adults are steady, like they're built out of certainty. But I remember my mom in the morning pouring coffee with the kind of careful movement you use when your hands shake and you don't want anyone to notice. The doors weren't the only thing. There was the garage. Whenever my mom asked me to take out the trash, I hated it, and not for the normal reasons. It wasn't just gross, it wasn't just inconvenient, but it felt wrong in a specific way the moment I stepped into the garage, even in daylight. The garage smelled like dust and old cardboard and whatever had soaked into the cement over years. It wasn't a scary smell, it was normal, but my body didn't treat it as normal. The moment I crossed that threshold, it hit me. A thick, focused feeling of being watched, not imagined, not the vague anxiety kids get when the lights are off. This was sharp, physical, like someone was standing just out of sight, close enough that I should have been able to hear breathing. I'd freeze with the trash bag in my hand and stare into the corners, into the shadows behind the shelves, under the workbench. The hair on my arms would lift, not slowly, but all at once. My stomach would drop as if I'd missed a step on the stairs. Sometimes I'd rush it, toss the bag in the bin, and sprint back into the house, pretending I was just being fast. Sometimes I'd force myself to walk because I didn't want to look scared. But even walking, I felt like I was moving through someone else's space. I never told my parents how intense it was. Kids learn quickly which fears get laughed at and which ones get ignored. And my parents had a way of answering fear with practical explanations. If you said you were scared, my dad would say, "It's just your imagination." If you insisted, he'd give you a list of reasons, like he could talk fear into leaving. But the garage didn't feel like imagination. It felt like the house had eyes. One night, something happened that my mom didn't brush off as easily because she saw it. She was awake in the living room, sitting up late. I remember this because she told us years later, and I could picture it perfectly. The lamp on, the TV low, the rest of us asleep in our rooms down the hall. She saw a shadow move down the hallway toward the bedrooms. At first she thought it was one of us. Kids get up for water, kids sneak snacks, kids wander when they can't sleep. She didn't panic. She got up a little annoyed, ready to send somebody back to bed. She walked past my room first. My door was open. She saw the shadow slip into my room. That's the part that stuck with her, the way it moved with purpose, like it knew exactly where it was going. She stepped into my doorway and flipped on the light. As a mother, she knew instantly I wasn't pretending. I was out cold. She said my face looked peaceful in that heavy, dead-to-the-world way. Kids sleep when they're safe. She checked my closet. She checked under the bed. She checked the corners because even though it sounded silly, she couldn't stop herself. No one was there. Confused, she went to my sister's room. Their door was closed. She opened it and found both of them asleep too, tangled up in blankets, breathing slow. No one was awake. No one had been walking the hallway. But she had seen something move. My sisters shared a bedroom. Later, once we learned the history, we realized that room might have been the landlord's daughter's room. We never confirmed it. We didn't have old floor plans. It was just an assumption that settled in our minds because it fit too well. That room had its own problem. At night, my sisters would hear tapping on the wall, not loud, not rhythmic, not like a branch against siding or water in the pipes. It was deliberate. A few taps, then nothing, then another cluster, like someone testing whether they were being heard. My parents told them it was the heater, or the house settling, or pipes. And because we were kids, we accepted it. Kids want explanations. Even weak explanations feel better than none. But one night, it got bad enough that the explanation didn't hold. My sisters started screaming for our parents, the kind of screaming that turns your blood cold before you even understand why. Over and over they yelled, "Someone is knocking! Someone is knocking!" I woke up to the sound. I remember my feet hitting the carpet, the hallway dark, my parents' door opening at the same time. We all met in that narrow hall, half asleep and suddenly wide awake. We rushed into my sister's room and we could hear it too. Not a crash, not a bang, just tapping, but close. Too close. Like it was coming from inside the wall, like fingers on the other side of drywall. My sisters were crying so hard they couldn't speak. My mom pulled them into her arms and kept looking at the wall like she expected it to split open. My dad stood there with that tight expression he got when he couldn't fix something. He listened for a minute, then forced his voice into calm. "It's the heater," he said. "It's just pipes." But he didn't sound sure. Years later, when we were older and we talked about that night, he admitted the truth. He only said that because we were kids. He didn't have an explanation. He never did. There were other things too, smaller but constant. Cabinets left cracked open when everyone swore they shut them. Drawers pulled out an inch like someone had started to open them and then changed their mind. And not every day, not enough to prove anything, just enough to make you feel like the house was quietly rearranging itself when you weren't looking. It became background, unsettling but familiar, like living next to a highway. You stop noticing the sound until the power goes out and suddenly the silence is wrong. Eventually, my older brother came to live with us for a while. His name was Ryan, and he was older than me by more than a decade. Old enough that he didn't see the house the way we did. He wasn't just trying to survive childhood. He was an adult with his own habits, his own sense of what was normal. My parents didn't tell him anything about the history of the house. Same way they didn't tell us. If anything, they were even less likely to tell him because he would have asked questions they didn't want to answer. He stayed in the room farthest from the rest of the bedrooms on the opposite side of the house near the living room. It had mostly been an office. That room had large windows that looked straight out into the backyard toward the place where the pool used to be. Ryan lasted a few weeks before the house got to him. One weekend night, the rest of us were in the living room watching TV. It wasn't late, just normal family time. Ryan had gone back to his room earlier, saying he was tired. Suddenly he came out fast. He was pale, not spooked pale, sick pale. His eyes were wide, and he looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked, which I'd never heard from him. "There's someone in the backyard." The room went still. Even the TV noise felt too loud. My dad stood up immediately. That was his role in our family. Something happens, he checks it, he handles it. He grabbed a flashlight and went outside. We all waited by the front window, peering through the glass, watching the beam of light sweep across the yard. My mom stood behind us, one hand pressed to her mouth. There was nothing out there, no person, no footprints, no movement, just the fence, the patch of grass, and that faint outline of the lawn that never grew right. My dad came back in annoyed, but it was the kind of annoyance people use to cover fear. "There's nobody," he said. "Probably a cat or something." Ryan shook his head hard. "I saw someone," he insisted. "I swear to God I saw a person standing out there by the back." Then he said something that made the air in the room change. "I don't like that room," he said. "I feel watched in there. Like someone's just staring at me through the window every night." The way he described it was exactly the way I'd felt in the garage. That electric skin, that sudden drop in the stomach, the hairs rising on your arms and neck, like your body is trying to warn you before your mind catches up. Hearing him say it out loud made me feel sick, because it meant it wasn't just childhood fear. It wasn't just kids imagining things. It was something the house could do to anyone if you stayed long enough. My mom had been sharing her own set of experiences by then, and I think Ryan's fear pushed her over some line. She contacted the landlord. She told them what had been happening, not in an angry way, not accusing, more like pleading for context. by one.